loud. And we are live. Here we go. We're being recorded. Welcome to the Do Tell Story Swap. We meet the second Tuesday every month. I think everyone here knows that, and you know all the details and the specifics. We don't have problems with iPhones going off in the middle. You know where the bathrooms are. I say that every time. And of course, we're all looking forward to the day when we can be back at the community center in Roanoke Park, where Evelyn lives. But I guess, that may be a couple months away. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we're all looking forward to that. But in the meantime, it's so nice to see everyone once a month. I don't know about you, but it sure seems to go by slowly and then very quickly. All of a sudden, it's the next month. Every day goes by very slowly for me, but then all of a sudden, all of this time has passed. I'm happy to be here, though. And we'll have announcements in the middle. We usually have a few tellers, and then around 8 o'clock, maybe a little before or sometimes a little after, we do our meet and greet circle with a short prompt so that we can introduce ourselves and say something about ourselves. And then there will be time for some announcements. I know there are some exciting things coming up that we don't want to miss. I want to thank Katie and Meg, who are our producers who get the word out and keep the website running. And I want to point out Elaine Stanley, one of the original founders of our swap, is here telling with us tonight, which is always a treat. So I think we ought to jump right into our first teller. And our first teller is going to be Evelyn.
Well, when I was 11, we had a word on our spelling test. The word was Bedouin. Now, every week, they always had one unusual word and they described what that word was. And when I heard about the Bedouin and that they traveled on camels through the Sahara Desert, there was something I fell in love with. I wanted to leap into that book and be a Bedouin. Well, if you live long enough, many of your childhood fantasies get to come true. So here I am. It's the end of COVID or the end of being so housebound because I've now gotten vaccinated. And YouTube, who kind of read my mind, starts sending me videos about how to turn your minivan into a home on wheels. Not only that, they start sending me videos about places you can go and camp for free in this home on videos. Well, I go to one of the websites and I discover there's a group of women that meet weekly on Zoom, and they call themselves nomads, and they do this and they teach other women how to do this. And not only that, they're having a gathering in May at in the mountains above Las Vegas. Well, Las Vegas is where my son and grandson live, who also had been vaccinated. So everything seemed to be falling into place. So I watch the videos. I get my van all fixed up to be a little home on wheels. I get everything to prepare for being in the high desert for a week. And I'm a little like Dorothy, who's been stuck in Kansas all this time. So I get my van and I go down the little yellow brick road, otherwise known as Highway 5. And I find my way to the Spring Valley Group campsite. Now, in National Forest, what they call a group campsite is basically a big space. There are no trash cans, no pit toilets, no running water. You have to bring all of that yourself. But right away, I met a group of women, and they were talking about how after the gathering, they were planning to go to Flagstaff, and they invited me to join their caravan, which that sounded great. I mean, caravan, that's very Bedouin. And so at first I was loving it. I loved the stark desert scenery. I loved the unusual plants. I loved the unusual birds. I loved waking up at sunrise and sitting outside and drinking my coffee. I loved hearing the stories from the other women about their nomadic life and things like blizzards and tornadoes. I mean, the only thing that was a little unsettling was that the women told me when they had first arrived, the ranger did warn them that they had two kinds of rattlesnakes there. One was your typical diamondback. The other was this green rattlesnake that was so poisonous, if it bit you, you were dead within 20 minutes. Well, you know what Bedouin doesn't have to deal with poisonous creatures. However, it did dampen any enthusiasm I might have had for hiking in the area. But still, I was having a lot of fun talking to these nomadic women. You know, everything was going great till day 5. Day 5, I woke up and realized my compost toilet in my van was getting pretty darn full. Also, I was really running out of room to put trash in the back of my van. And my lips were more chapped than they had ever been. I mean, every afternoon we had the hot, dusty wind blowing through. And all of a sudden, I went from loving being this minivan Bedouin to wanting everything I had back in Sonoma County. I wanted to be able to stand up when I got dressed. I wanted a full bathroom with a real shower. I wanted trash cans in some other room besides the one I was sleeping in. I went just like Dorothy. I wanted to click my heels and be back in Sonoma County with its Mediterranean climate and its tall trees. I wasn't alone. A lot of the women were a little less than enamored with the dry, hot, deserty winds. So they were packing up and leaving a day early, and I went ahead and texted my son and said, would it be okay if I came to Las Vegas a day earlier than planned? And he said, of course. So I packed up my stuff and realized it was really fun to have the courage to do this Bedouin adventure. But just like Dorothy, it's also great to go home again. Thanks.
That's a great story.
Wonderful. Wow. I was sure when you mentioned the green rattlesnake that it was going to be in your van. I have never heard of that. That was great. We had Dorothy, the yellow brick road, and the green rattlesnake is like the wicked witch of the West. Wonderful. Well, welcome home. I see that we have another visitor to our swap. Kenneth, are you there? Kenneth Foster.
Kenneth and
Hey, and Patricia.
And Patricia, right.
It's my dog, Tig.
I introduced Elaine Stanley as one of the original founders of this swap. And I'm sure everyone here probably knows that Kenneth Foster is the other founder of this swap. And before I started coming, I know that you had these meetings in your garage. Is that right, Kenneth?
That's it. We called it the Story Studio.
The Story
Studio. It was only a garage on other days, but on our day,
Swap night.
Swap night, it was the studio.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
And
we
it
are very lucky to have you.
You have to understand that that garage transformed into a studio. It
Yeah.
had rugs on the floor, curtains on the back door, and hangings on the walls so that it wasn't echoey.
With your help, Elaine, to transform it.
Well,
Yeah.
this is what is so wonderful about Zoom is that I believe, Kenneth, you're in Washington. Is that right?
Actually,
Yeah.
most of you probably don't even know, Elaine knows, but we are actually in Tennessee.
Oh, my goodness. No, I didn't.
And so it's 10 o'clock, a little after 10 o'clock p.m. here.
Wow.
And actually, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to move to Georgia, just across the state line.
Well,
But
Ellen just told us a story about being nomadic.
that's it. We're
You're
Bedouins.
right.
Bedouins. So, no, this was a temporary home, and we found our permanent home just across the state line.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we're so glad that you're here, Kenneth. Thank you for coming.
And I've wanted to do this for 2 or 3 months, but I keep falling asleep at 10 o'clock. But Patricia put her alarm clock on, and here we are.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate it.
Now I don't want to take any more time, so let's go.
Well, we're glad you're here. So our next teller is the host of the Sacramento Swap, and I'm going to introduce Ed Lewis.
Hello. All right. So I hope we get to hear a story from Kenneth tonight. That would be fantastic. I haven't heard him in a long time. Since we've had more time in this last year, I've been digging through my old notes, storytelling notes from workshops, and I found notes from a workshop I took with David Novak over a weekend at somebody's house in in the Bay Area. And I found this technique that I want to play around with that I put away and never used. So I'm going to try that out here tonight. There once was a colony of ants that was harvesting grain in the 110-degree weather during the summer. Every day they would wake up at 6 a.m., have a few bites of grain, and be out in the fields by 8 a.m., where they would toil all day long until 6 o'clock, and they would come in, have a light dinner, store their grain in the cellar, and be in bed by 8 o'clock. This went like that the entire summer because they knew that the 20 below zero weather during the winter would be rolling in, not in the near distant future. The grasshopper, on the other hand, would wake up about 11 o'clock, go play a few video games, check his Facebook posts, and then he'd have his favorite fly salad sandwich, topped off with a fresh squeezed glass of moth juice, which, as we all know, is 100% organic. Then he'd go out into the field and kick back on his hammock and listen to some tunes, and he'd also play his beautiful music as grasshoppers do by rubbing their legs together. That was his routine. The elder ants looked down at this grasshopper with disgust because they knew that if he didn't save for the winter, he wasn't going to make it through the winter. Well, that's how the entire summer went. The ants toiling, the grasshopper having a good old time, relaxing, playing his music. Well, the winter did roll around, and the ants buttoned down, got a nice toasty fire, got some grains up, and buttoned down for the winter. Before long, it was about maybe 2 weeks, the grasshopper was running out of food, and his shelter really wasn't that great, and the cold was just pouring in on him. Well, before long, he was starving. So he went over to the aunt's home and he knocked on the door. The elder opened up and he said, "Please, can you feed a poor, lonely, hungry grasshopper? Bring me in. I can entertain you for the winter." And the elder looked down at the grasshopper with disgust and said, "We toiled all summer long while all you did was play your music. Why don't you just eat your music?" And with that, slammed the door. Moral: if you don't plan for the future, you just might not have a future to plan for. Oh, hang on. What? What? Really? My fans don't like that ending? Are you sure? Okay, let me think about this. Oh, okay, excuse me. My fans have just let my agent know that I need to do something better with that ending. So let's try this. So the grasshopper is at the door and he's knocking on the door, and the elder opens the door and looks down at the grasshopper. "Please, can you feed a poor, lonely, hungry grasshopper? Let me come in and spend the winter with you. My shelter is not adequate. I'm freezing to death. I'm starving." And the elder ant looked down at the grasshopper with disgust and said, "We toiled all summer long for the winter. Well, you just played your music. Why don't you just eat your music?" And he was just about ready to slam the door when the little ant looked up. "Father, I, for one, think we owe this grasshopper a debt of gratitude. His music, his beautiful music, made my toil go so much better. It was much more bearable. I think we should invite him in for the winter." Well, the ants got together, like they do with their antenna, and had a little conversation. And the elders saw the wisdom of this young ant, and they invited the grasshopper in for the summer, for the winter, where the grasshopper shared some amazing stories of all the adventures he'd been on and played his beautiful music. Moral: a life with all toil is a life without joy. Oh, wait. Oh, excuse me. Really? That was a better ending, wasn't it? Come on. Okay, all right. I'll think of something else. Okay, hard to please fans. Okay, I got it. Okay, this is going to be the best ending you've ever heard in your life. So the grasshopper's in there for the winter, playing his music, telling stories, and it was a fantastic winter. And towards the end of winter, they hear a tapping on the door. They opened up the door, and there is the most beautiful monarch butterfly that they have ever seen. And she looks down at the grasshopper and says, "Well, sugar, are you ready for our trip down to the Bahamas, where we like to go in the early spring?" "Yes, ma'am." And the grasshopper turned to the ants. "Thank you so much for such a pleasant winter. And I will be back in the summer to entertain you." And with that, he hopped on the back of the butterfly, and they headed off to the Bahamas, where all spring they sipped pina coladas, sucked on the sweet grasses, and joined the local reggae band. Moral: while it is important to feed our bellies, it is also important to feed our souls. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And so would you say the technique is to provide multiple endings, each with a different moral?
That's it. Yeah,
that's
and we looked at different fables in the workshop, and we all messed around with doing that, making morals that we wanted to and play around with it. But I like just the technique of thinking about different possibilities
right.
and the humor involved with that.
Grasshopper kind of reminds me of my son. Anyway, wonderful. I'd like to try that. And so next on our list is me. I'm going to tell a story. And this is actually half a story. It's kind of the other part of the story I told last month. I told a story about a Zoom bomber that kept coming into my class named Chud, C-H-U-D, which we thought stood for an acronym from a movie, Cannibalistic Human Eating Underground Dwellers. But of course, it turned out it was my student. He couldn't turn his camera on or use the sound because his connection was so bad. And Chud actually stood for the Office of California Housing and Urban Development. It was his father's Zoom account. But at one point, I had used a horn to drive Chud out of my office hours. And this is really a story about that horn. We take it to the San Francisco Giants games to root them on. I should have brought it. It's over in my son's room. But this is also a Mother's Day story. And I was trying to create something that would celebrate different dimensions of motherhood. And we all know about the kind, nurturing side, the side where they bake cookies for us and make soup when we're sick. But there's also another side to them, and that is the fierce protector. And this is the side of a mother that, you know, a child can sometimes even be a little scared of their own mother. And so this is an anecdote from my childhood that involves my mother. I grew up in Mill Valley, 2-story house, and my bedroom was right below my parents' bedroom. We had an outdoor cat, which meant we put kibble on the front deck, and it would come by at night. We never saw the cat, really, and it would eat the kibble. The problem was the raccoons were starting to eat all the cat food. And so we started to worry that the cat wasn't getting any food. And so my mother started to put the kibble on the back deck outside of her bedroom, which meant the cat had to go over the roof, drop down onto the back deck, and eat the kibble, and then go back over the roof and do whatever it did all night long. Of course, you know, raccoons are very smart, and they quickly learned they could go over the roof and drop down on my parents' back deck right in front of their bedroom. And I'll never forget the first night I heard my mother's feet hit the floor, and she started stomping her feet and clapping her hands and shouting, "Ah!" as she drove these things away in the middle of the night. And the raccoons started to get bolder. They got used to this fierce sight of my mother doing this. And she stomped louder and clapped louder and shouted even louder, "Ah! Ah!" But they got used to that too. And one night, they didn't budge. And my mother stood there with her hands on her hips and watched as they shamelessly ate every piece of kibble right in front of her, and then filed up over the roof and off into the night. Well, this was the 70s. And another thing that was going on was we had all these crank phone calls at dinner time. And we'd be sitting there and the phone would ring, and my mother would answer the phone and say, "Hello." And someone would say, "Is your refrigerator running?" And she would say, "Why, yes, it is." And they would say, "Well, you better go catch it." And they phoned us every night. And my mother was at her wit's end, and she phoned the police, and they gave her a bit of advice. The next time the crank caller calls, use a whistle and blow it right into the phone. And it's so unpleasant, they'll stop phoning you. Well, we didn't have a whistle, but we did have this San Francisco Giants spirit horn, the kind that you blow at Giants games to root the home team on. And I remember how the phone rang. Someone informed my mother that the 400 pizzas she had ordered were waiting for pickup at the following address. And she pulled the phone off her ear, shouted at my father, "Byron, get the horn." And he put it to his lips, and with a sputtering prelude, he gave it a blast. "Blow it again, Byron." And he did, and it worked. The horn drove the crank callers away. They stopped phoning. So, when no amount of stomping her feet and clapping her hands and shouting worked, she gave the command, "Byron, get the Giants horn." I like to try to imagine what this must have looked like. I heard it from below them. My mother's feet, of course, hitting the ground, her stomping, her clapping her hands, her shouting, and then the command, "Byron, get the horn." And then my father in tow with her, the horn protruding right over her left shoulder, and her instruction, blow it, Byron." The sputtering prelude and that sonic blast out into the night over Middle Ridge Mill Valley in Marin County. And it worked. It drove the raccoons away. Well, the last time she used that horn, it wasn't a raccoon she drove away at all. I remember her feet, like always, hitting the floor above me, the stomping, the clapping, the shouting, the command, "Give it a blow, Byron, blow the horn." And of course, the horn. The curious thing about this night was that my father blew the horn again and again and again. It didn't stop. And I imagined the raccoons simply weren't leaving. Well, they weren't. But as I said, it wasn't a raccoon that we were dealing with. The next day, my mother recounted how she had seen a blurry shape at the bottom of the door. And with the first blow of the horn, it had shot upwards right near the door handle. She told me, "I thought it was a raccoon trying to use the door handle. They have very dexterous hands." Well, my father gave the horn another blow and another, just inches from this thing through the screen, over and over again. It had been convulsing and moving at the door handle, and then it ceased to move and just hung there limply, suspended 2 feet off the deck. Well, as I said, it wasn't a raccoon. It was their cat, our cat. It had been so frightened by the first blast of the horn, it had shot up and its claws had gotten caught in the screen. After they unhooked its claws, it shot out into the night, and they spent the entire next day looking for that cat. There were phone calls from neighbors. I heard my mother saying, "Yes, I'm sorry about that. We won't be using the horn at night anytime soon." The food was placed back on the front deck. But I told you this is a story celebrating multiple dimensions of motherhood. And of course, we end with that nurturing side. Thereafter, every night, my mother would sit out in the dark and the cold, sometimes for hours, waiting for that cat. And only when it showed up would she pour out a little kibble and sit with it until it had eaten every last piece. Thank you. So that was the other half of that's the background story to the horn that I used on the Zoom bomber. All right. So I know that Sharon has a longer story, so maybe we will forge ahead in our list and come back to her. We do have several other people signed up. And next on the list is none other than Katie.
Hi there. This is a story in progress, so I hope you enjoy it. I've just finished a book called Time Song by the British writer Julia Blackburn, and it's about an ancient land known as Doggerland. And it was formed over 2.5 million years ago, and it connected the east coast of England to the continent of Europe. And then after the last ice age, Doggerland became lush and fertile. There were grasses and trees and insects and fish and animals and birds and humans. But with the rising of the ocean waters, Doggerland became flooded and it slid beneath the waves of the North Sea. As a child, I grew up beside the North Sea in a small fishing village on the North Norfolk coast. The village and the surrounding countryside, I thought, was nothing special when I was growing up, but little did I know. It was a hard life for the fishermen of the village. They would go out throughout the year in these small wooden boats. They had an engine and a pair of oars. The fishermen never learned to swim. As a child, this shocked me. If you stand on the beach, the coast curves around and it's as if you are surrounded by water. And at night, you can see the lights of the lightship. And that's warning the passing vessels of a huge sandbank known as Dogger Bank, which of course is a part of Doggerland. So the wind and the sea continue to claw at the cliffs and the beaches, and whole villages have been lost. Many years ago, the village of Dunwich lost not only its village, but its church. And during a storm, it is said you can hear the church bells ringing. Growing up, I was aware of the mysteries and the magic and the superstitions that the country folk held. And Enid, a wonderful young woman who looked after my brother and me, at night she would tightly close the curtains and say to us, we must never look outside, look out through a pane of glass onto a full moon, because if we did, terrible things would happen. And we believed her. Two miles north of the village is the town of Cromer. And it was recently discovered that half a mile out to sea, there are the remains of an ancient forest bed. And when the water is calm and clear, you can look down onto the blackened ancient tree stumps. And a few miles further on, in where I went to high school, the entire skeleton of a woolly mammoth was found in the cliff. I probably passed that many times. And then further on again, at an extremely low tide, they discovered a ring of tree stumps, ancient tree stumps. And in the center was an upturned tree. And they thought that that was used for ceremonial burials. What did these ancient people believe in? There is an image that stays with me. It's of a burial, a young woman, and she has her right hand extended. And in her hand are the feet of her baby son. And he is lying on the wing of a swan. The strength of the swan and the white softness of the feathers. Did they choose the swan because it can both swim and fly? Did they believe that the swan would carry the boy's spirit to the land of the dead? Or would it take it up past the stars to the heavens beyond? And it's got me thinking, what are the ceremonies that I believe in? What are the mysteries and the magic that leave me spellbound. What if I call on Swan? Because surely Swan is the goddess, regal, fierce, strong, fearless. What if I ask Swan, remind me where ceremony is? Where do I find mystery? Where do I find magic? What if I turn off my computer, leave my cell phone at home? I walk out into the meadows, the woods, the forest. I go into the hills and the mountains, and I find the source of a river, and I follow that all the way down to the ocean. And at the ocean, I scrunch my toes into the sand. I taste the salt on my tongue, and I sit still and silent. And I wait. I wait for mother's answer, for the goddess's answer. And it is in that waiting that I remember we are all connected, each and every one. And with that remembrance, I know I am truly blessed. Blessings, abundance, and healing to you all.
Sorry. Katie, that was so beautiful. My goodness. Where do you find mystery and magic? Well, I know where I find it. I find it listening to you.
Thank you.
So amazing to hear about where you grew up and how you've continued to bring that magic and mystery with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And next on our list, we have Vicki Ness. Let's see, I've got to find Vicki. There you are.
Hi there. I have unmuted myself and I have the window open because it's hot. So if you get outside noise, pretend like you don't hear it. So I'd like to tell you about a small town in the middle of America that nobody's ever heard of. And the people are so busy and they're so productive and they've got so many things on their plates. They're like those guys that spin the plates on the sticks. Very busy people, very productive people. But they have one thing that no other town has, and that is Mr. Shadow. Mr. Shadow is a dark force. He creeps into the corners and slides up the walls. And at a certain time at night, extinguishes all the lights. He fluffs out all the candles and he starts to move all the things that are lit up and bright and dim them and dim them and dim them until they're no brighter than an ember. And this happens in every house in the town. And the people start to stretch and they start to relax. And then he throws his cloak over the town and dust settles and it starts to seep out all the electricity so that the devices go quiet, so that the noises dim, and so that the evening is allowed to come in finally to people's houses, full and dark and alive. Well, the people at this point just start to feel totally enveloped in a good, warm, compassionate universe of darkness. And they put the little shades over their parrot cage and they fold up their newspapers and they put the cat food out on the deck for the kitty and they get themselves into bed and wrap themselves up in a dark, deep sleep. And at that point, Mr. Shadow opens up his coat and all the lights that he has taken are spinning and twirling, some as big as Oh, vague like butter melting on wax paper, blearing out. Some are little tiny white shaky things. Some are little and yellow like fireflies, and they fly out over the town and they come in through the chimneys, under the windows, wherever. And people's dreams are sparked with lights and brilliant colors. Well, this is what happens every night in this little town that nobody's ever heard of. And one day, a stranger came into town, checked into the hotel, bright colors, colors crawling all over his suit like, oh, cockroaches in the middle of the night, crawling colors, very busy. And he says to the hotel clerk, yeah, well, I need to stay one night. Yeah, busy, very busy, very busy. And the hotel clerk said, well, that's fine, sir, but you need to know that at a certain point, the night creeps in. Okay, just to let you know, it gets dark, it gets quiet. What are you, a bunch of pumpkins? What's the matter with you? Bunch of idiots. What's the matter with you? No, yeah. I stay up all night and I work because I get things done. Well, sure enough, Mr. Shadow crept into the hotel just like he always did, and the dark fingers of shadows crept up the walls, and a dark, dark, dark dust settled over everything, in a peace and a quiet, except for the man with the suit, who was very, very unhappy and sat there in the dark, rumbling very loudly to himself. And the next morning he left and proceeded to outline exactly what a bunch of inbred bumpkins live in this town, that they put up with this idiot, Mr. Shadow. Nobody else would put up with that, you losers. And off he goes. Well, the hotel clerk thought this was enormously rude. But just for the heck of it, he went back and asked the hotel owner, do you think we're bumpkins? Do you think we're idiots because we go dark at night and do you think that's stupid? Well, the hotel owner said, there's nothing wrong with our town. There is nothing wrong with how we do things. With or without Mr. Shadow, you can go back to work after you shut the door behind you. And everything's fine until he starts to think. Then he asks his wife as she's bustling out the door to go get groceries, Edith, do you think we're a bunch of idiots to let Mr. Shadow do what he does every night? I mean, I'm just asking. Do you think that's stupid? And Edith said, what's stupid is asking me. I happen to like Mr. Shadow and I happen to like what he does. So excuse me, I'm busy. So off she goes to the grocery store. But as she's standing in line with her bread and her butter and her brilliant ripe apples, she asked the clerk, well, I just was talking to somebody and I just overheard somebody saying that that we look kind of stupid for having Mr. Shadow there, that really we could get so much more done if we didn't have Mr. Shadow here. So I'm just wondering, what do you think about that? And the man said, well, I think we're fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And the policeman standing behind her said, yeah, oh, that's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. And he's crunching on his apple. We're fine. We're good. We're good. But a little while later, the policeman asked the police commissioner, there's a mob out there and they're saying we look stupid because we have Mr. Shadow and we look like bumpkins. Yeah, bumpkins. The police commissioner said, you have work to do. I am busy. Go. A little while later, he got the mayor on the phone. He said, the press nationally is calling us stupid. They're saying we're bumpkins. They're saying we're idiots because we allow Mr. Shadow to extinguish our lights at night. That can't be right, can it? Well, the mayor said, I think you are right. I have been wondering this myself in my wisdom. I thought this way long before you ever thought of it. I thought of it too, way before you ever thought of it. Maybe you should look into it. So they got themselves 2 gumshoes out of the police department to go and follow Mr. Shadow, which they did. And sure enough, there's Mr. Shadow creeping along after he's put all the lights out, down dark alleys, into a black room with just curtains hanging down. When they dared each other to go look, you go look. No, I know when you go look. Well, finally they parted the curtain, and there he was, standing very silently, eyes of coal with tiny, brilliant, piercing yellow in the middle. Said nothing, did nothing. That's him. That's him. And they threw a bag over him and they grabbed him off to jail and they threw him in a cell. Okie dokie. So at that point, the mayor got on a big old loudspeaker and went up and down the town saying, you know what? You can do anything you want all night. Oh yeah, Mr. Shadow's in jail. Oh yeah, not to worry, Mr. Shadow's in jail. You can go party all night, which people did. And they partied and they sang and they danced and they worked on their computers and they texted and they did all manner of things. Yes, they did, until about 72 hours later, maybe a little longer. And everybody got noticeably crabbier and tireder, because no matter what they did, the lights wouldn't go out. The lights stayed on. The computers kept spinning around. Life kept going on right in front of their face. And they not only couldn't sleep, but when they started to drift off, they never dreamed. No dreams, no sleep. People got really, really annoyed. And so what they did was they got en masse pitchforks, torches, and stormed the mayor's house and said, you need to let Mr. Shadow go again, or we're gonna get really pissed at you. Okay, so the mayor is no fool. Down to the police station he goes and he says, you know, I told them that it's your fault. I just want you to know this, you're an idiot. Why did you put him in jail? What's wrong with you? I knew a long time ago that Mr. Shadow was very, very valuable. Well, the police commissioner didn't want to be in the middle of all this either. So he asked his people to go look in the jail cell and maybe let Mr. Shadow out, but there was nobody there. There was darkness. There was dripping of dew and slimy walls and spider webs like cotton in the corners and occasional rat, but there was no Mr. Shadow. So the mayor poked his head and said, Mr. Shadow, sir, you can go now. Free to go. Bye now. Well, nothing happened. So the commissioner and the mayor got into a big old hunkin' fight, each one saying nastier things to the other that they would never dream of saying at any other time. And Mr. Shadow slowly pulled all the darkness from the cell until he stood right next to them and listened. And their conversation got darker and darker and meaner and meaner. Mr. Shadow slid silently out like a wisp of smoke. And that afternoon, he went around creeping under the windowsills, down the chimneys, through the walls, and snapped off the lights. And his cloak powered down all the electricity. And in the dim quiet, people started to hear a call for something very important that they didn't know what it was, and it wasn't on their phone and it wasn't on their device. It was a call of something, maybe they'll just slip into their jammies, and well, maybe they'll, feed the cat and put the cover over the parrot cage and fold up their newspapers and put their books away and climb into bed. And as soon as they did, sank into that oblivion of darkness. And sure enough, the dreams returned, sparkling and twinkling like so many stars. And everybody got a wonderful night's sleep, except, of course, the police commissioner and the mayor, who were still squawking at each other. And we don't know if they ever went to bed. That's the end.
Oh, wonderful.
Wow, Vicki, that was amazing. What beautiful description of the darkness too, and the sparkly dreams. And now that had the feel of a folk tale. Did you learn that story somewhere, or?
No, I made that one up. I made up a bunch of stories, and that's one of them.
Wow.
Impressive.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we have two other tellers on the list, and that's Sharon and Elaine. But I think now would be a good time for us to take our break. If anyone is interested in adding their name to our list, you can either let Katie know in the chat or just say something, um, and we can fit you in. We usually introduce ourselves, and there's always a rather seasonal prompt, so that we can kind of say a little bit of something about ourselves and share that with each other. And this month, what we're going to do is share what we do, what is one thing that we do to cope with the heat of summer, which is coming. And of course, we got to start getting ready for that. My favorite thing to do is to dip my hat in a cold river if I happen to be near one, and put the hat on while it's dripping wet with cold river water. I always think that feels really good. And of course, my name is Brandon, and I'm the MC of our swap. And I live here in Santa Rosa, and I'm a high school teacher. So I'm just going to start going down the list. Katie, would you share what you do?
Okay. Hi, I'm Katie Mangan. I live in Santa Rosa. And what I do is at night when it cools down, I just open all the windows I can. And then, you know, in the morning, I guess before 8 o'clock, I just close everything up and the house stays pretty cool.
And next on my version of the participant list is Meg.
My name's Meg Brown and I live in Forestville. And like Katie, I open up the house, close it in the morning. It's the natural air conditioning of Sonoma County that I think keeps me here, to be honest with you. And other than that, you know, nice, cold, icy drink, maybe even on the weekend at G&T, which is somehow just really cold. So yeah, try to keep it going and keep that heat from getting down.
Well, thank you, Meg. Is your mother next to you? Does Mary want to share her secret to beating the heat?
We'll see if she will. And here I am.
Hi, Mary.
Well, I've had a lot of experience with extreme heat, living for various periods of time in Phoenix, Arizona. And the way I would cope would be to get up very early in the morning at dawn while the cool air from the night was still there and try and get as much done. Otherwise, I would curl up with a book and forget where I was.
Whoa. Wonderful. Thank you. And next on my list, I have Ed Lewis.
Yeah, my name's Ed Lewis. I live in Davis, California, and our summers are unbearable. So what I do to cope with the heat is leave California. Go up to Alaska, go to other places, travel, you know, and then depending on how hot it is, use fans whenever I can.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. I think I'm going to try that. And next we have Evelyn.
Hi. Well, my favorite thing is swimming, and it was really hard during COVID because all the pools were closed. So last year I actually swam a lot at the Russian River, and this year I am going to be swimming at the Russian River until it gets too low. But the outdoor pools are now open, and so I'm really looking forward to being able to swim again. I really missed it during COVID.
And it sounds like you like swimming in natural bodies of water.
Yeah, I do that too. Actually, it's what I prefer, but it's not always as easy. So
sounds nice, Evelyn. Thank you. Next we have Cher and John.
Okay, Cher?
I'm Cher in Bodega, and I like to sit out on the deck. John made this really wonderful misting tree out of copper, and sit by the misting tree.
Oh.
And what I like to do is take one beer, put it in the freezer around dinner time, and try not to forget it. Otherwise, it'll be a frozen popsicle. But otherwise, just have a really nice cold beer.
Ooh. I might go for one of those tonight. I'm going to put it in right now. Next, we have Dimitri. Hi, Dimitri.
Hey, so I'm Dimitri Nichols. It's dark on my screen, but that's okay. Nothing really interesting for the summer. Tried the whole put the beer in the freezer thing once. Did not end up very well. There we go. What they'd be like. And so I haven't done that since. But just throwing open the windows when the sun falls. Thankfully, around here, no matter how hot it gets in the day, it does cool off towards the middle of the night. So that's always the time, apart from running the AC.
Thank you, Dimitri.
And Belle says hello from the other room.
Is she still in her meeting, or is she still working on her? She can certainly introduce herself if she wants.
You want to introduce the long stroll across the apartment? Scooch over.
Yay. Hi.
I just smelled smoke out there, and I saw that it was a little elevated on Purple Air, so I'm trying to figure out where it was coming from. I haven't seen any reports of fires, but because in a couple days I'm trying to figure out what's going on. During the summer, I think I usually just try and forget about it, honestly. I grab a book.
Pretend the heat doesn't exist.
It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Now we have Gay. Hi, Gay.
Oh, whoops. Okay, I'm unmuted. Well, Evelyn and I are swimmers. And what I like to do is basically what she does. I try to get in the Russian River as much as I can. I have a friend who lives very close to the Russian River. So we can just walk from her house there, and it's lovely. It just cools you off, and the serenity is beautiful. Anyway,
That sounds wonderful.
Mhm.
And next we have Ellie Shiva.
Oh, hi. Hi. Oh, my name's Elisheva Hart, and I live in Petaluma in a little duplex, really cool. Not, the old hippie cool kind of thing. Not. We do have a fan up in the ceiling that you can turn on, but I have perfected the 2-minute cold water shower. And I think this year it'll probably have to be cut back to a 1-minute cold water shower. Just dash in, get water all over, cold water all over, and then put on as little as possible. And yeah, like many people have said, find a good book or something like that.
Thank you, Ellie Shiva.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine, and I live in Santa Rosa. And I've done all the things everybody else has done, but I used to go when I was younger, every summer, and whitewater river raft, because you could get wet anytime you needed to cool off. You just take your hat, scoop up river water, and pour it over your head, or start water fights between the different rafts on the trip. And I would usually be hanging out over the raft going, hit me, throw the water at me. So I'd get wet.
Oh.
Nowadays, I just drink cold beer if it's really hot, or stay in air conditioned places, whatever.
Hmm.
And I do swim because Oakmont has 3 pools. So you can always find a pool you can go get wet in, and that cools you right off.
Nice. Thank you. And here we have Kenneth and Patricia.
Yeah, here we go. It says, well, when we lived on the West Coast, we'd often just go to the coast to get cold. We like to walk through the redwood forests there when it was really hot. And we have not spent a summer in the East yet. So we're waiting for that.
We're expecting it'll be humid, and the home that we're moving to in Georgia has a swimming pool. So I'm
Ooh.
sure that we'll enjoy cooling off in the pool.
Nice. And I hear the peaches are pretty good out there.
Yes. I didn't tell you where we currently live. We live in a small town, a suburb of Chattanooga. It's called Ooltewah, and it's spelled Ooltewah. It's Cherokee, and it means owl's nest.
Oh,
And it's pretty nice little town. And we are moving to, you say it,
Chickamauga.
Georgia. This is the place where one of the very big battles of the Civil War was fought. And our new home backs up to the battlefield, which is now a national monument. Maybe it's a park. I don't know. National monument there. So different names we're learning in our area. So that's what we do.
It's hard to address envelopes to you two.
Yeah, already it's pretty hot. Today it was in the mid 70s, and this weekend it's going to be 83.
With higher humidity. That's what makes it seem so warm.
Yeah, we're up into the 80% humidity already, and it's May. So
that promises to be a hot summer then.
Yes.
Unless it's like Groundhog Day where it's the opposite. I don't know.
That's true.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Patricia. And here we have Nicolene. It's always a surprise to see who's next, isn't it?
Well, my apartment get pretty hot, and the 3 past days have been in the 90s here. So when it was still okay, but 83 in my apartment, not so good. But last summer, what I did when it really get very hot is to put a washcloth on my neck, a wet washcloth. And when that's not enough, I go to refugiate myself in the laundry room where I live. That is much cooler, and there is air conditioning there. And also I try to go shopping where stores have air conditioning, since I don't have one. So that's my way to cool off.
Thank you, Nicolene. I'm going to remember that. The washcloth, the wet washcloth. It's a French trick, I take it. And we have Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
I use the Ed Lewis method. I get out of California. I'm up on the Puget Sound right now, and it's chilly. I have trouble remembering when it was even warm, much less hot. You know, it rains every day where I am, so it's a different world. But I think I used to do the same things as the rest of you.
Thank you, Sharon. The Puget Sound. Oh, that sounds wonderful. And I believe we already Vicky, what do you do to cool off?
I got some. Hands down, ice cream. Bang. Ice cream. I live in Sebastopol and we go down to Mimi's Ice Cream, or if I'm in Petaluma, Lala's or Lola's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, ice cream, root beer float. And the other thing is we have this tree out by our garden beds, and I sit under the tree at night and just watch the various birds and critters and everything going on. So, but ice cream is my first aid kit. Anything but heat too.
That's wonderful.
So normally we take the break before the circle. The momentum of all these great stories just kind of pushed us right into our circle. So I'm going to ask if people would like to take a short 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we can have some announcements. We have 2 storytellers, Sharon and Elaine. And if anybody else is interested, it looks like we'll have time for at least 1 or 2 others. So hopefully someone will decide that they want to share a story tonight. It is 8:11 now. Why don't we take a quick break in case someone wants to run to the bathroom or put the beer in the freezer? And we'll come back at 8:16 or so. I'll turn the sound on. I'll have my dog summon everybody. I'm sorry he's been barking here and there. He's too much. All right, so a 5-minute break.
Perfect. Thank you.
Zoom our recording. Welcome back from our break. Okay. And again, if you're interested in telling a story, you can put something in the chat to let Katie know, or just give a shout. There's an
I have been thinking of a short story lately, so put me on the list.
Very good. So we
Put him ahead of me. Put him ahead of me.
Okay.
No. Either way.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else interested? Okay. You might inspire someone to tell a story.
Yeah.
So we have a couple announcements. I know that Ed Lewis has an announcement, so I'm going to let him say a few things about some upcoming events.
So this Saturday, like your swap group here tonight, we have our monthly Sacramento Storytelling Guild gathering, and we have about 6 or 7 tellers. It's kind of like the group, your group here, and it's on the website for stories, the storysac.org. And also the monthly genre storytelling series is this month on May 19th at 7 o'clock. There'll be 8 tellers from different swap groups. I know we have somebody from the Do Tell. I forget who it is at this point. Do you happen to be on? Let's see, who is it? Do Tell is, oh gosh. Well, I can't remember right now, but we'll have 8 tellers, and it's legends, urban and traditional. And I put in the chat the link to the Storytelling Association of California and the Genre Storytelling Series. That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ed.
And they're a free event.
So I would like to add to the upcoming events. I'm going to quickly share my screen and show you the San Francisco Folk Festival is coming up June 12, and it is another virtual year. So what you do is you register on Zoom, and there's a button you click here for blue events. What does that mean? Well, here are the blue events. You can see over in the corner here are storytelling events. From 1 to 1:20, we have Stories in Living Color, hosted by Rick Roberts. I'm the MC for the general flow of the program. Rick Roberts will be hosting Stories in Living Color, and that is a paired African American and white teller. There are 3 different pairs. They each tell a story about their backgrounds, and they work together and they share what they've learned from each other. There will be 3 different pairs, and I believe you can click on this to go to the event. Here are the pairs. So Ben Tucker is a well-known storyteller, and Terry Stokes, some of you may have heard him. Here is Rupa Mohan. She is from the San Francisco San Francisco Asian Art Museum. Karen Amano, and then Ruby Simpkins and Elizabeth Vanderkamp. So that is one of the events. And then Ed is hosting a genre telling extravaganza, and he's going to be featuring one of each of the genres that he runs over the course of an entire year. Something that we're excited about as well is the Southern California Showcase, hosted by Marilyn McPhee and Tina Tomiyama. These are all Southern California tellers, and SAC has been kind of oriented to Northern California because we're based up here. So we're trying to really reach out down to the southern half of our state and involve people down there. Finally, from 4:30 to 6, the tellers from the Jenny Fund. And the Jenny Fund was created in honor of a teacher. This pays storytellers to go into classrooms and tell stories. and they have been running programs on Zoom since February. And so some of the school storytellers that participated in the Jenny Fund outreach program will be featured. And this is hosted by Rupa Mohan. So it's a wonderful day full of events. It's free, and all you have to do is pre-register. It will be on Zoom, and you'll be able to tell how to get to the storytelling event once you register. Does anybody else have an announcement? Katie or Meg? I suspect you might have something. Meg? No, no announcements. Okay. Anybody else? Very good. So we're ready to move to our first teller of the second half, and that is Sharon.
Okay, I'm just reading in the chat that Val said she had an announcement.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, all right. Thank you. I missed that. So let me find Val. And that's here. So I need, Dimitri, I need you to turn your camera on if you have an announcement. Very good. Okay, so I can. There you go.
Oh, they're just really small things. There's I was actually just doing tech for the Story Arts of Minnesota. It's doing a virtual storytelling festival, and it's all free through the rest of this week. I can go ahead and pop the link in the chat in a minute, and then I have a friend in Utah who's also having a virtual festival this week that also has a few free events. So it's just, you know, if you have a spare hour or two and you want to listen to some great stories, they're happening this week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Val. And yes, please do put the links to those in the chat. That's great. I'm sure there are many interested people here. And so let's return to Sharon.
Let's see. Okay. In the Just So Stories, Rudyard Kipling said that there are 535 tales about the great King Solomon, son of David, Suleiman the Magnificent, Suleiman bin Daud. And this is not the one about the ruby with the hole in the middle. And this is not the one about the river of gold. This is the one about the butterfly. And King Solomon was the wisest of all wise men. He understood everything. He understood everyone from the judge on the bench to the beggar on the street corner. He understood the language of animals and the birds and insects. He understood what the rocks meant when they rubbed against each other deep inside the earth. And he understood what the leaves were saying when they rustled in the morning breeze. And he was powerful. On the third finger of his right hand, he had a ring. And if he turned it once, mighty jinn would come up from the desert to ask his will. If he turned it twice, flights of fairies would come down from the sky to see what he wanted. And if he turned it 3 times, Azrael, the mighty angel with the sword, would come all the way down from heaven to sit with King Solomon and chat with him about doings on earth and under the earth and above the earth. But King Solomon never used his mighty powers to show off. And he could have, because he had trouble. King Solomon had 999 wives. Now, everybody had a lot of wives in those days, but as the king, he had to have the most. And some of his wives were nice, but some of them were horrid. And the horrid ones picked on the nice ones until they became horrid too. And his palace was full of gossiping and backbiting and arguing and unkind, nasty, vexatious fighting, quarreling, until poor King Solomon had to go and walk alone in the garden and sit under the camphor tree and wish that he had never been born. Now, one of King Solomon's wives, the beautiful Balkis, his favorite wife, his true love, kept herself apart from all those women, and she too walked alone in the garden. And she watched King Solomon, and she felt really, truly sorry for him. And one day, as he sat out there, Solomon observed two butterflies having an argument. And the one butterfly said to the other, "You should be much more respectful. You should understand who you're dealing with. I have tremendous power. If I so much as stamp my foot, I could make this entire palace and all the grounds just disappear like that." And King Solomon, for the first time in many weeks, laughed out loud. And he called that little butterfly to him, and he perched on his finger, and he said, "Little brother, why did you tell such an outrageous lie? You could stamp your feet all day and all night, and you couldn't bend a blade of grass." And the butterfly said, "Oh, great king, live forever. It's true, but I was trying to calm my wife. She's quarrelsome, and you know how women are." And King Solomon said, "Oh, indeed I do." And the butterfly flew back. And when he got back, his little wife said, "The king heard you. The king heard what you said." And the butterfly said, "Well, of course he did." And she said, "Well, what did he want? What did he want to say to you?" And the butterfly said, "He asked me, please, not to stomp my foot, because this palace is very expensive and the oranges are just getting ripe." And so the little wife listened and thought, And the great Queen Balkis had a terrific idea. So she called that butterfly wife to her. And when she perched on her finger, she said, "Little sister, do you believe the things that your husband said?" And the butterfly wife said, "Of course not. He just gets all upset over nothing, and the next day he'll forget all about it. You know how men are." And the queen said to her, "Here's what to do. The next time he threatens to stamp his foot and make everything disappear, tell him, go ahead, stamp all you want, stamp, stamp, stamp." So the little wife flew back to her husband, and it wasn't long before they were quarreling all over again. And the butterfly said, "You should be careful. Remember who you're dealing with. I have tremendous powers." And she said, "Oh, go ahead, use them. Stamp your foot. Stamp all you want. Stamp, stamp, stamp." Oh no. So the butterfly flew back to King Solomon, and he said, "Oh, great king, live forever. Now what shall I do? Because I'll stamp my foot. She'll see that I have no power. She'll never believe anything I say for the rest of our lives." And King Solomon took out his hand and turned his ring, and he said, "Yes, she will." And he turned it once, and 4 mighty jinn rose up from the earth. And King Solomon said to them, "When this little fellow stamps his foot, I want you to make the palace, the grounds, the fountains, the trees, everything disappear completely. And if he stamps it again, please return everything back exactly as it should be." So the butterfly flew back to his wife, and soon they got in a quarrel. And after he warned her, he went ahead and he stamped his foot, and everything disappeared in blackness. And the poor butterfly wife was so startled, and she flew around like a moth in the blackness, and she said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. I should never have quarreled with you. How could I have questioned your judgment? Please, please restore everything." And so he stamped his foot, and he did. And King Solomon, for the first time in many long weeks, laughed until tears came to his eyes. But out of the palace came pouring all those 999 wives, and they were terribly upset. So Balkis ran to stop them and said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Oh, it's a terrible trouble, Queen. Something awful has happened. Everything went black. We're afraid that King Solomon has died and the earth is mourning his death. And Bacchus said, oh, not at all. Come along with me and see for yourselves. So they went behind the camphor tree and peeked, and there was King Solomon wiping the tears from his eyes. He had laughed so hard that he cried. And the queen said to Bacchus, well, what in the world has happened here? And she said, well, his friend, a little butterfly, had a quarrelsome and vexatious wife. And to help with that problem, King Solomon was forced to use his mighty powers. And the queen said, oh, if he would do that just to help a butterfly, what might he do to us? And so all of them quickly pulled up their veils and put them over their heads and tiptoed back into the palace as quietly as might. And Bacchus went up to King Solomon and she said, oh, great king, live forever. You have worked a great magic that will at last calm your terrible, vexatious, quarrelsome wives. And Solomon said, I did no such thing. I've been playing with a butterfly all afternoon. And she said, yes. And what you did for that butterfly that you would not do for yourself has solved your problem as well. And he said, oh, great king, great queen, my Bacchus, that I love so much. How did you get to be so wise? And she said, oh, it's just because I love you. And they lived happily ever after.
Oh, Sharon, that was wonderful. I don't know if this is the first time I've heard that word, but vexatious, that's such a great word. You always have a gem in one of your stories, and the image of a butterfly stamping its foot. Of all the animals stamping a foot, that's a great one. I always feel so secure in the embrace of your stories. They're really wonderful, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandon.
And I think what I will do is call up Kenneth to tell his short story. And it's such an honor to be introducing you at the swap that you and Elaine founded.
Well, I'm not sure that it's that big honor. It's been a long time since I've told a story. And I've been thinking for the last couple of weeks about a story that I heard, many years ago. And actually, I probably told it, and I'm sure when I told it, I tell it better than what I'm going to tell tonight. But it's about perception. Long ago, there were two monks walking to the market. It would take them 2 days to travel from the monastery to the market. And as they were walking along, they had to cross a river. And there at the edge of the river was a young, beautiful girl who was struggling to get across the river. Now, as you know, the moral code of the monks is very strict. But without hesitation, the senior monk swung down and picked up this young woman and carried her across the river and put her down on the other side and continued to walk towards the market. The younger monk stood there with his mouth gaping open and his mind just racing, like, what did you do? You know we're not supposed to touch a woman. What? And for all the rest of that afternoon, his mind was just racing. How can I trust this man? He was my elder. He was my teacher. and he broke the moral code. And what am I supposed to believe? How can I go on? And his mind was just racing, and he was getting angry and getting upset. And that evening they slept under the stars, but the younger monk just tossed and turned and tossed and turned. How can I deal with this? How can I trust anything he says? How can I do this? And finally, about midday the next day, as they were getting closer to the market, he had it. And he turned to the senior monk and just said, "You touched a woman! What am I supposed to do? You're not supposed to." And the senior monk looked at him and said, "What you saw and what you think you saw and what you wanted to see are up to you. I put her down at the edge of the river long ago, but you carry her with you still."
Oh, that is so neat. Oh, I got chills. It's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for that, Kenneth.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about that. I think
Mm-hmm.
with all that's going on in the world, we see things on the news, we see things in the world. What do we really see?
Mm-hmm.
And what are we thinking about?
Yeah. And cling to and kind
And
of
clinging and hanging on to. Yeah.
obsess over. Yeah. A very apt story, appropriate. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
And I believe the last teller of the evening is going to be Elaine. And so let me find Elaine. And there we are.
Hey, what a wonderful night of stories. These were wonderful stories. I've got one I haven't told in a long time, but thought it would be fun to tell. It's called The Tale of Tales. Long, long, long ago, when the earth was new, the animals could talk. There were no humans on earth, only animals, but they could all communicate to each other just fine. And the word went out across the land that there was to be a big party. Oh, all the animals heard about it. The lions, the tigers, the lambs, the rabbits, everybody heard about it, but they didn't care. They didn't want to go to this party. All the birds of the air and the fish of the sea heard about it, but they didn't care. They didn't want to go to this party because it was a dog party. It was for all the dogs in the world. Well, one animal was upset because he wanted to go. "I love parties. I want to go to this party." And it turns out, I know you could guess it, but it turns out it was Coyote. Coyote said, "Look at me. I have ears like a dog. I have a nose like a dog. I even have a tail kind of like a dog. I think I should be able to go to this party." So he decided he was going to try. He pulled out a little dog nose from his costume box and he put it on and he practiced barking. Bow! No, that's not a bark. That's not a bark. But he worked at it. Pretty soon he was getting a few barks in there. And then one day he really buckled down and barked all day. And by evening he was barking. He sounded kind of like a dog. And he goes, "All right, I'm going to the party." So the next day, the party was to be happening. He went running down to where the party was to happen. He had several miles to run. And when he got there, He was a little out of breath and sweating and wiping the sweat off. And the head hot dog out there said, what can we do for you? And he goes, well, I'm here for the party. I mean, look at me. Don't I look like a dog? I bark like a dog. Can I go to the party? And they looked at him and they said, well, you look kind of like a dog, but you don't smell like a dog. Oh, well, I ran very fast. I ran really hard. I probably smell a little different, but I'm here for the party. And finally they said, well, okay, we'll let you go to the party, but you've got to work. Work? I'm here for a party. And they said, well, yeah, but there's going to be so many dogs. We need help. We need you in the coat room. So when they come, you can take their coats and hang them up. And he goes, coat room? And they said, sure, we can't have all those dogs with those big furry coats and flicks, ticks, and fleas and things running around in that party. No, we need them to take their coats off so we can all fit in there and have a good time. Okay, said Coyote, but I do get to go to the party. Oh, yeah, you'll get to go to the party. So they put him in the coat room, and pretty soon the dogs started coming. Well, the dogs came from all over the world. There were big dogs, small dogs, fat dogs, skinny dogs, hairless dogs, hairy dogs, big dogs, little dogs. I mean, there was every kind of dog you could ever think of, and then some that you couldn't think of. It was amazing. And the dogs came, and Coyote took their coats and he was hanging them on hangers. There were 3 rows of hooks around the room. They were in a big room, big as a house. And there were bars hanging there with hangers on them so he could hang up all these coats. And the dogs kept coming and the dogs kept coming. And pretty soon, Coyote found himself standing alone in the coat room. And he could hear in the next room, all those dogs were over there having a good time. There was music playing, they were dancing, they were eating, and then somebody brought him a dish full of food. Well, he went, oh, good, I get some party. So he was eating the food and listening to them, having a good time over there, talking and having a party, and he goes, that's not fair. It's just not fair. And at that, he leaned over and put his paw on one of those coats. And as his paw slid down the coat, the tail came off in his hand. And he went, oh, look at that. He walked over to another coat and he pulled on it. And sure enough, the tail came off in his hand. And he put the first tail on that coat. And he went, I have a great idea. And so to the music coming from the next room, he danced around that coat room and took all the tails off all the coats over here and stuck them under his right arm, went sliding across the room to the other side, pulled all those tails off those coats and put them under his right arm, took the tails under his left arm and put them on all those coats. And so it went for the rest of the night. Coyote was dancing across that coat room, taking tails, sliding across the coat room, putting those tails on, taking the other tails off. And he went all the way around and through all the bars of coats, moving tails. And then the dogs, who were doggone tired now, were filing out to get their coats. And there's Coyote handing them their coats, and they were putting them on as they drug their little tired bodies out the door. And finally, the last dog left, and Coyote danced out into the night and went, oh, I can't wait for the sun to rise. And off he went home. And sure enough, the next morning, all those dogs got up, they stretched, and they didn't feel quite right. Something was not the same. They didn't know what it was. Coyote, he kind of smirked at it. He knew, but nobody else knew. And that is why, from that day, long, long, long ago, to this very day, when dogs meet on the street, they have to sniff each other's tail just to see if that dog might have their tail. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Elaine, that was so wonderful.
The tale of tales.
Wondered why they're doing that.
Now you know.
Now I know.
Okay.
Well, we have 10 minutes left. Is there anybody else who's interested in telling a story? And I'll check the gallery here. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming to the May meeting of the Do Tell Story Swap. I want to thank Katie and Meg, our faithful producers who put this on every month and let me host all these wonderful stories. It was so nice to see Kenneth. Hope you come back, and next time you'll be Zooming from Georgia from the sounds of things. And Gay is sharing her screen, it looks like. Gay, are you meaning to share your screen? Okay. Well, anyway, with that, I'm going to bid everyone a good night. Oh, you are? Okay.
But also, can I just say to you, Brandon, thank you again for being our wonderful host.
Oh, my goodness. Of course. It's such an honor to be able to participate in such a wonderful group. I'm so happy to be here.
Right.
And looks like, is this Gay's screen?
Yeah.
That's good.
I think she wants us to check out the summaries on the website. There is always a kind of a synopsis and a write-up of every one of the Do Tell meetings. So you can look for that there. And of course, it's recorded. You can go to the SAC YouTube channel and see a recording of this and relive the whole thing. Coyote tails and all, or dog tails and all. So good night to everyone. And I hope to see you all next month. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night. Beautiful places.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night. That was fun.
Wonderful stories. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
It's almost morning here.
Good morning.
It was great seeing you and Patricia, Kenneth.
Yeah, great seeing all of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We enjoyed the stories.
Good night.
I'm surprised you didn't ask people to take the train since it's Chattanooga.
Yeah, there you go.
Take that choo-choo.
Yeah. Take the Chattanooga choo-choo. That's great.
Night, everybody.
All right.
All right. Good night.